Hi, and welcome to this pilot episode of Transformational Selling, the podcast for sellers, sales leaders, entrepreneurs, and business owners who are looking to drive up sales, increase their revenue, and smash their targets for this year. I'm Steve Lowndes.
And I'm Bryn Thompson.
We are directors at New World Selling and co-authors of the book Transformational Selling, How to Adapt Your Sales Style to the New World. Okay, Bryn, well, pilot episode. We've been talking about this for a long time. Glad that we've actually got off our arses and made it happen.
Yeah, well, it took us 10 years to get to write the book from when we first started talking about it. So I think the fact we've been doing this for a year is pretty good.
We're speeding up as we get older, which is great. In this particular podcast, obviously this is the first one, so chance to maybe share some ideas and thoughts. But what I thought we'd do this week is I thought we'd kick off with a little bit about what we've learned or what have we seen over the last week or so in the world of sales that we think might be quite interesting. So tell me, Bryn, what's been your biggest takeaway from this week?
Well, my biggest takeaway, Steve, is I've gone old school. I went back to doing a live prospecting session, something I haven't done since we started the business. I brought in my ex-colleague, who you know very well, Afshin Samji, because we do a little bit. You probably know I'm also chairman of a business, Flame PR, in London. Yeah. So she came into the office and we blitzed it for 2 hours and we booked 6 meetings by the old school of actually phoning people up. So anybody who thinks prospecting, cold calling, call it what you will, is dead, believe me, it really isn't, because we've got some great meetings lined up next Monday and Tuesday. And another old school thing, we're not doing them via Teams or Zoom, we're doing a road trip. Love it.
So, picking up the phone, booking meetings, doing it face to face. Fantastic, brilliant.
What about yourself?
So what have I picked up? Well, actually old school, the other way. So, interesting post on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. A guy called Jake Dunlap, who I follow, he does a lot of work in and around sales. A lot of it is about kind of sales tech, sales enablement, and looking at the future of sales. But there's a really interesting statistic, and this might kind of link back to some of the themes that we were talking about, particularly in the opening for transformational selling, because, and I'm going to have to get the glasses on and look at this. So some research that he's done, prediction, by 2037, 80% of B2B salespeople will be obsolete.
I guess that's the AI impact, really, and also probably how people will buy things online and not need sellers.
Absolutely. Well, I think AI is the big piece. Although we've seen technology, even without AI, has replaced sellers and has been. Interestingly enough, there's a bit of a timeline. So it's quite a good post, actually. And if you look at the timeline, but he's talked about the idea that by 2027, this will have started to happen and this will start. But interestingly enough, and exactly as we've predicted in transformational selling, the sales jobs that will go first and the sellers that will become most obsolete are the ones who are operating at that really transactional end. Yeah. So if you're just asking simple questions, you're delivering the same bog standard demo or product pitch back, etc. If you're just following that process from a scripted perspective, you know what, you can get a bot to do that. And a bot can ask questions, and a bot can get the information back, and a bot can then relay the key advantages of your offering back to the client. So, you know, he started to talk about the fact that actually what you've got to do is really start educating yourself. And he said, if you're going to stay in that 20% of sellers that won't be obsolete by 2037, what do you think his key advice is?
I guess it's got to be, what are you doing that's really adding value to improve your customer's business?
Absolutely. And the key thing there, he said, become an expert in your particular area or niche, which, funnily enough, is something that we're going to be talking about today as one of the key pillars of transformational selling. Now, I'm going to put a bit of a caveat around this, actually. So in terms of the research that he did and the timeline that he came up with, he actually used ChatGPT to do the research and come up with that. And obviously that's amalgamated all the ideas that are out there, but you do feel like actually you've asked AI to talk about what the future of AI will be like. slight hint of marking your own homework there, I think, from that one. But the reality is I think it's coming, and whether that 80% is accurate or not, I think it's just a stark reminder that as sellers, we've got to really add value to the process.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because I received a couple of LinkedIn messages this week, and I was reading them, and they were very strange, because they're like, "Hi, Bryn, I would love to reach out to you. I'm looking to build my network. When's good to have a chat?" So I didn't respond, and then I got another one on a similar line, and I wrote back. I went, "Mate, we worked together for 5 years. Are you using AI?" And he went, "Busted. I'm really trying to increase my LinkedIn profile, and I've been using ChatGPT to do so. It should not have gone to you." So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that is great. Are you? Tell me afterwards.
I won't tell you who it is.
Do I
don't
know?
want to out them, but they were an associate trainer back in the day when we all worked at
Oh, so
Pareto.
I'll know them as well then.
You will, yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll test it out after that. I'll send them a cheeky message as well after that as well. Brilliant. So look, plenty of things we've learned. We've learned about actually new school of AI and what that's going to do. We've gone back to but old school is still really effective from that point of view. So some interesting takeaways this week, I think, from the world of sales. Moving on though, and getting into the main idea behind certainly today's session as well that we're going to be going through. I want to talk a little bit about the concept of transformational selling, and in particular the idea of the three pillars that we identified that are core to not just the transformational selling principle, but I think business to business sales as we move into this world of AI and as we move ahead into the future. And those three core pillars, as you'll well know because you helped me write the book, focus on outcomes, leverage your expertise, foster collaboration. Okay, three really core principles. I thought it might be interesting to just delve a little bit deeper into each of those. So I'm going to come to you first of all, focus on outcomes. So that was the first of our three core pillars. When we talk about focus on outcomes, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think when we talked about how sales was evolving and what the changes were, we talked about the big shift, if you like, in the 80s and 90s to consultative selling, and how that was so much focused on finding client pain points. But people hadn't necessarily taken a step before that and gone, what do you really know about your customer and your customer's business? What's your customer trying to achieve? We know that everybody in a role has KPIs, metrics, targets, ultimately that feed into the overall business objectives. And it seemed to me that that ought to be the starting point. The starting point ought to be really understanding what they are before we can then look at what are the things that they're not tracking in the way that they want to. What are the things that are getting in the way of achieving those goals? So the pain points come after the success criteria that the client is aiming to achieve in the course of, well, in two ways really, in the course of the overall business objectives, but for any individual a salesperson's working with, what are they measured by? What do they live and die by? And what is not working as well as it should, that's going to create that gap between where they're at now and where they need to be. And it was you, Steve, who came up with the idea that ultimately it's very similar to coaching. How are we coaching our customer to make them realize they're maybe not where they need to be, and the gap starts to widen in their mind? And the wider we make that perception of the gap between the success criteria and the challenges they face, the more likely they are to do something about it.
Do you know, and it's that coaching piece, and that was I would say, during my sales career, I've had several epiphany moments. But that initial epiphany moment came, and it was probably 15 years ago, if not more, when, funnily enough, I was doing some work with a group of sales managers around sales coaching. And we were looking at kind of actually how do you conduct just a simple coaching session. And we're all familiar with the typical models, your grow model and things like that. And it suddenly occurred to me and I kind of made the statement, I went, look, structuring a coaching session probably isn't that much different to doing a sales call. And then suddenly, actually, it isn't that much different. Actually, there's so many parallels here because ultimately, as a coach, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to get somebody to help achieve their objectives, but most importantly, I'm trying to get them to implement change into their lives in order to do it. And that might be to try something new or different or take a different approach. What am I trying to do when I'm selling? Well, when I'm selling, I'm trying to get someone to change what they're doing, switch over to using our products or our services. And I went, as a coach, if I'm trying to get someone to change, I'll do that. As a seller, I'm trying to get someone to change. Wouldn't the structure of that conversation and the way in which I take someone on that journey be very similar? And you're absolutely right. And that's where, ever since then, I've sort of observed, and actually the best sellers do this. The best sellers coach their customers around it. And every coaching session has to start with, well, what outcomes do you need to achieve?
And it's interesting, isn't it, that when you work with a bunch of managers or leaders, this idea that the kind of light bulb moment for them, it is ask, don't tell. It's ask, don't
Yeah.
tell. And so many of those managers tell the sellers how to do it. But we also see that in the sales world. Let me show you our PowerPoint presentation. Let us show you this piece of software and how wonderful it is. Let's demonstrate that for you. And we know that's not what the client needs. What the client needs to understand is how's this going to fix my problem? What do you know about my business that's going to potentially give you that insight to be able to put something together? And you're only going to find that out by asking, and asking links into coaching.
Absolutely. So here you go. So top tip, focus on outcomes. If there's one thing that people listening can take away from that idea and apply to their sales piece, what would it be?
I would say whoever you are dealing with, understand what they are motivated by, what drives them in their day-to-day business, what is important to them, and how that links to the overall business objective. They will almost invariably have a boss. Even if they're CEO of a business, they'll probably have a board. They may have a private equity company invested in them. Everything's got to link into that and the objectives of each party. And when you are trying to align those objectives across a bunch of multiple stakeholders, which any sizable deal generally you have to do these days, try to make sure you are covering all the bases and ticking all those different boxes, because those objectives will always be the same across different stakeholders.
Absolutely. And I think for me, wrapping that one up, really, really simple thing that I think anybody can take away from that is, and I say up front in the conversation, if we're sat down opposite your customer or your prospect, let's ask them the question. What is it specifically you've got to achieve this year? What is the target, metric, objective, outcome, KPI, OKR? There's a million different words for them. But what is the thing that when you get to the end of the year, you need to have achieved? Because if I can understand that, then we can start to have a conversation about potentially how what we do can link into helping you achieve that. And here's the thing. If what we do doesn't help you achieve that, you're probably ultimately not going to buy it. So, from that particular perspective, it's about being able to make that really clear link. And I think being bold enough to ask that question is key. That's the pillar number one that we found was really key from that. The second one, and again, it kind of links to this idea of coaching, but it also links to actually those 20% of sellers who will survive beyond 2037, assuming that prediction is right. And it's this idea of leverage expertise. So tell me a bit about leverage expertise and what that means to you.
Yeah, I think storytelling has become incredibly important now in sales, but the storytelling has to be relevant, specific, and contextual to the problem or challenge that the client faces. So if you can then replicate that and say, interesting you say that, we've been working recently on a similar challenge with a customer. This is what we've done to help them. And this is the outcome, going back to the first pillar, this is the outcome they've received as a result of that. Or sometimes saying, I can understand why you might think that might be the best route to go down. However, what we've found is there are some pitfalls to that. Being able to use the expertise, and a lot of salespeople, particularly those just setting out in their career, well, I don't have that much expertise. Yeah, but your company does. You've been doing this day in, day out.
And that's key.
For how many years?
This is key, actually, because, it's not your personal although, great, you've got that personal expertise, and you'll build it over time because you'll carve out that niche. But the company you work for, so even if it's your first day in, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of people who have been working in this field and have that. It's tapping into that, what you're leveraging and the expertise. And that's why we say leverage expertise. It's not spout your expertise, it's leverage. What expertise does your organization have that you can be bringing into the sales process? And I think about it this way. And I often ask delegates this question. I go, look, you're a salesperson. You're in a team of salespeople. You probably speak to salespeople day in, day out. So, you can share ideas and you get thoughts. I went, imagine though, and we talk about their target persona. So let's say you're selling to, let's say HR directors or head of people or whatever. Go, if you're an HR director, how many of you are there in the organization? And the answer will be probably just you. Mm-hmm. So I'm the only HR director. Great. How many other HR directors do you speak to day in, day out? And the answer is you probably don't. If you're an HR director, you may occasionally do some networking and speak to others, but you probably don't speak to that many other people who do that role. So actually, the difference is as a salesperson, my customer who's an HRD may only speak to one or two others, even in a week or a month or even a year. But I'm speaking to dozens of people just like you every week. What can I share about what they're talking about? What can I share about their ideas? What can I be sharing about their insights and bringing that and sharing that with you? So from that particular perspective, because I talk to a lot of people in that particular field, I can share some of the ideas and some of the thoughts. I can open up and get their thoughts and discussion and get the conversation going around that. So, as an organization, and there's loads of different areas where we can build that up. That's just one example. But leveraging that expertise, bringing that into the conversation and getting someone to kind of see things from a different angle, I think is such an important part of sales.
Yeah, and I was taken to task because in my group, one of the groups I trained recently, I had a head of marketing, and I made the mistake of saying, people aren't going to read those 4-page case studies on your website. I said, really? We put a lot of time into those, into developing them. I'm saying, well, I'm not saying they're a bad thing, but it's really important for sellers to know what their colleagues are doing or anybody in that business to know what have we done with this company. And to be honest, Steve, I'm staggered by the lack of knowledge or the lack of information sharing that goes on. It's only sometimes when you get together and say, give us a few stories as to success that you've had, and you'll look at blanks in the audience. I wasn't aware of this. I wasn't aware of this. Some of it's real gold. And, just to share that, even to do a half-hour lunch and learn once a week, or call it what you will, where somebody goes, this is how we won this deal, or this is a particular project we've done for a client, doesn't really matter what that is. What was a challenge? How did you help to solve it? And what was the outcome? If you can talk about those three things to a client, as long as that's relevant to their situation, they're going to go, here's somebody who's been there before, who knows kind of what we're facing, has got some ideas for us. And that's where you can create that light bulb moment, I think, for your client.
Absolutely. And we talk a lot about that idea of the light bulb moment or the oh shit moment.
Yep.
Where actually we just create that bit where someone sits back and goes, I hadn't thought of it that way. And because in day-to-day role, the people that we're speaking to, they've got a lot on their plates. They're down in the detail of doing everything that they're doing. And actually, as a salesperson, if I can just shine a light on a different perspective that's come from even sometimes outside our own organization, but of a problem, an issue, or an outcome that somebody else in their situation has achieved, it's a really great way of starting to bring that forward. So you're absolutely right. And we all, we talk about this, having the stories that we're able to share, and at least even new sellers on the first few days. I was speaking to, really interesting actually, speaking to a client this week, and they were talking about, as part of their induction program, sending some of their new starters actually out to meet some of their customers
Yeah.
and find out, what does a day in the life look like for a customer?
Yeah.
Because then I can see it warts and all what's going on. So when I contact a prospect over here, I can share some bits and pieces around what I've seen, what they've done, different approaches they've taken. And that for me is a really great starting point for leveraging that expertise.
I think the other thing in leveraging expertise is sometimes disrupting your client's thinking. So your client may be thinking of going down a certain track, and it is one of the anecdotes in the book, but I give it as an example on when I'm training people, and I talk about when I had to go to Paris just after we'd voted for Brexit, and I'm pitching against two French companies to win business with a large French company owned by a French parent company, thinking, well, not much chance of winning this, but I've got to the last three. And so, although the PowerPoint presentation was okay, I thought, this is not going to win it. So I stopped the presentation. I said, when the training's over, how do you plan to protect your investment? Which led to a conversation that they had put no provision in for management training, and therefore they might get a spike in performance, but it's likely to dissipate if the managers weren't coaching it. It led to moving us in a totally different direction, and not only did it enable us to win the contract, we got all the management training as well, which added about another £40,000 to the contract. Now, when I look back on my career, I do wish I'd done that more often, and really challenged the client's thinking and made them reconsider. Again, it created the oh shit moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess really, if we kind of encapsulate that, I think something really simple that a seller can take away from that piece would literally be, for me, it's go and look at maybe 5 or 6 different sort of success stories, delve into those and think about, what could my prospects learn from that particular story that's going to open their mind to think a little bit differently. So it's understanding and talking to, or even spending time with maybe some of the people who were involved in that sale.
Absolutely.
And go, what was the nugget that turned the key, that turned that light bulb on for a client, and how can I then, and just think about the questions I can ask and how I would introduce that to new prospects to get them thinking about that. And that kind of brings us then on to the final sort of interlinking pillar, really. And this is the idea of fostering collaboration. And I think this is about changing, for me, this is about changing maybe the mindset from a sales perspective, in terms of what the relationship looks like between me and my prospect, or me and my customer, and what kind of relationship we should be having as we move forward. Give me your thoughts.
Well, this is dear to my heart, and I coined the phrase "Don't be a Labrador," and I say Labrador, one of my favourite dogs, but it will always bring you the slipper, no matter how far you throw it, and no matter whether there's a reward on offer or not. And sometimes as a seller, we become the Labrador. We do everything our client wants. Send me a proposal, send me the email, send me some pricing. Whatever that is, we do it without asking for anything in return. And that creates an inequitable situation. We develop this master-servant relationship where we put our clients on a pedestal, and we do whatever they ask us to do. So the whole point of fostering collaboration is treating your client as an equal. I would say it's probably, from all the interventions I've ever got involved with, I'd probably say it's the one thing that I really feel that when companies have done this, it's made a massive difference to the business. Or stop just sending proposals, stop just sending quotations without your client putting some skin in the game. It's about gaining that, what we call active commitment. Passive commitment to me is you just send something to the client, you go, okay, and I'll give you a call next week. You don't even know whether the client reads it or whether they're interested. You haven't got any gauge or mechanism to know, how well are we doing in this? How far up that ladder are we climbing to get towards the order? And it's crazy. And yet sellers do it because I guess it makes them feel busy, and they can say to the boss, yes, I've got 5 proposals out there. Yeah, but how do you really know? It has a massive impact on pipeline and forecasting. And that's why if you talk to any head of sales, chief exec, private equity company, what's forecasting like in your business, 9 out of 10 will say it's disastrous.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about that. I like this idea of equity. And I like this idea that actually both parties have got to put something into it. I think one thing that really holds people back from developing this true collaborative piece, and you're right, there's the master-servant relationship. I think there's this desire to want to be liked by salespeople.
Absolutely.
And to be a people pleaser. And I think the trouble is, if you're a people pleaser, when someone gives you a little bit of a fob off, you take it and go, oh, I'll run around. And even in your heart of hearts, when someone says, well, send me an email or send me some stuff through around that and I'll have a look at it. And in your heart of hearts, you kind of know, am I being fobbed off here? But I think not wanting to challenge that, not wishing to push back on that, going with it with the view that, well, if I do what they say, they'll like me. And if they like me, they might buy from me. And it's kind of this it becomes a fool's errand, doesn't it, when that starts to happen? And I think that just being bold enough to have that honest conversation and say, look, if this isn't right, either we are on this journey together or we're not on the journey at all. But if my customer isn't coming on that journey with me, isn't prepared to commit time and effort to that next stage, well, there's a reason for it. And part of the reason is they probably don't feel that they need it. They're probably actually not that interested. They may just being polite or whatever, and not without wanting to not say no. And from that particular point of view, for me, it's just a case of if we can't both collaborate as part of this. Now, we'll work together on it. It doesn't mean that you're going to buy from me at the end. It may be that we'll get so far and decide it's not right. And that's okay. But I need to see you working with me on it. And if you're not prepared to commit anything at any stage of the process, it should be a red flag for me that actually maybe this isn't that important to you. So it's having those kind of conversations. And there's lots of opportunities, I think, to collaborate, to get your client involved or your prospect involved in the process. But all the time I'm going, what are you doing? If I'm doing some work here, what are you actually committing to it? And actually, if you do commit something to it, it probably means you're more likely to see it through. So testing that out and testing it out early. So one piece of advice, one tip, if you could give one tip to any sellers out there right now about how you foster that collaboration, what would it be for you?
I would say there's 2 parts to this one tip. One is set your objectives before every interaction with your client and go, what would be a really good outcome for me and for that client? What do I want my client to commit to at the end of this meeting? Because if you don't go in with that objective, you sure as hell are likely to not achieve it. Mm-hmm. The greater the commitment the client makes, the more likely you are to be getting that order. It won't win every time, but it will save you a lot of time wasting of doing proposals, quotations, pricing, whatever it is, where you become what I call a busy fool. Don't be a busy fool. Your time is as precious as your clients. I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's cool. So I think really what we've talked about here is just some of those core principles, that transformational selling piece around focus on outcomes. We've talked about leveraging the expertise, both that you will build up over time, even if you're relatively new into sales or you're new into an industry, but also that your organization has built up from years of working with clients very similar to the prospects that you'll be reaching out to. So leveraging that expertise, but really important, we go in on an equal footing with our clients and our prospects, that we get, if we're going to give time to this, that we're getting something back from that, and that it feels like a really collaborative approach to us working towards something. So some good tips and some good ideas for focused around that. So I'd like to finish off this episode. And I know you climbed off your soapbox. Mm-hmm. I'm going to let you climb back on your soapbox.
Oh, great. It's my favourite thing.
It is. So I can see you're itching to have a rant about something. All right. So I'm going to set you a topic. You've got 30 seconds All right. You don't know what this topic is, by the way, so I haven't given you any time to prepare. 30 seconds, and I will be timing this. All right. Tell me about the phrase, I could sell ice to the Eskimos. 30 seconds to tell me, what does that mean to you right now?
I thought you were going to say people buy from people, and I was really going to have a rant then, but this is just about as big a rant. So why would you sell anything to somebody that doesn't have a need for it? It seems absolutely crazy, and I hear this, oh, they could sell coals to Newcastle is probably a thing of the past now. Ice to Eskimos, well, that's probably even diminishing with the ice cap melting.
Possibly.
But nevertheless, nevertheless, why? Surely the art of selling is all about establishing a client need, building building that need in the client's eyes in terms of the urgency around it. But you're not going to sell anything to anyone who doesn't need it. So why would you sell ice to the Eskimos? I don't get it.
Brilliant. I let you have slightly more than 30 seconds there, probably because I blindsided you that one. For those who don't know, I didn't tell him that. I did tell him you were going to have a different topic, but I wanted to put you right on the spot there. Great. Totally agree with that point right at the end. It's one of those things that absolutely makes my skin crawl when I hear it. So lovely to hear that we're on the same line from that. So look, it's been, actually I've really enjoyed this. It's a bit of a pilot. Obviously, if I think we've enjoyed ourselves. If you've enjoyed it too, let us know. Drop a comment in there. Subscribe. There will be more episodes to come. And we'll look forward to sharing more ideas, bringing in some guests, and getting to hear Bryn rant about a lot of other things over the course of the next few episodes.
Pass the word on if you like what we're doing, and we'd love to see you again next time.
Until next time.
Bye for now.